Hello again, Middle Earth Strategy Battle Gamers. We are back with our 8th army review of the series, and we are going back to good, as I alluded to in my Azog's Hunters review. And we are going to the Army of the Lord of the Rings books, and we're going to do Rohan today. So I have the Rohan expert himself with us here, everybody. It's Joe. Surprise, surprise.
What's going on, guys? So, just to clarify, I've been playing Rohan since 2005. So 16 years. I was in middle school when I started playing them. I've played them through 3 editions. I played them when they were really bad. I played them when they were good. I played them when they were pretty good, and now I'm playing them in this current edition when they are, in my opinion, really good. So I could pretty much tell you every list build potential. But the thing about Rohan, especially in this edition, well, even in last edition, but especially in this edition, we won't go too much into it in this video because we're going to save it for another video. But Rohan's actually a really versatile army. You can build it in a ton of different ways.
Yes, really
mainly because like the legendary legions, and because with Rohan, Warren Rohan and Gondor War coming out, you got tons of legendary legions with Rohan. But today we're going to be talking about, let's just say you don't want to take a legendary legion, because there are some legendary legions that you can't, so for instance, I made a test army. Just an example. I took King Theoden on a horse with heavy armor. This is an 800 point list, guys. King Theoden with heavy armor, horse, and shield. I think Theoden is a must-take in this army, especially in this edition. And then I have Thade. I have Amir, Darwine, Durnhelm. I have a grand total of 10 riders of Rohan, and they're all dispersed in those warbands. And then I have a total of 12 Royal Guard. 5 of them have throwing spears. 7 of them are just on horse, and the 5 with throwing spears are also on horse. So that's just an example. So, for instance, there's no legendary legion in any of the supplements where you can take Thade with Amir or Darwine or Durnhelm. So I think that Thade is a excellent model in Rohan.
Yeah, Daedric, so, I think he gets overlooked a lot just because of the fact that it's not in those legendary legions.
And I play to. We'll go over that in a sec. So first, we're going to start off like how we do with all the army reviews. We're going to go over the troops real quick.
Oh, guys, this is army review number 9. I'm sorry, I've done so many now. I've gotten lost.
Yeah. So the first I'm going to go over is a Rohan Outrider. Rohan Outrider is fight 3, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3, shot 3. You can upgrade them on a horse. They have expert rider, and then they have a rule called Vanguard. Outriders may use a friendly hero model steadfast regardless of range, and that's huge. So I'm gonna kind of put all my cards on the table. I used to take a bunch of Outriders. There used to be a tactic back when the profile first came out. In the Two Towers Journey book is when their profile came out, and they had 0 might, 0 will, 0 fate under their profile. And then when you paired that up with Gambling's Banner, then you're talking about pumping your troops with might, which is a big deal. So the tactic with them used to be you pump them with might, you run around the board with them, you'd be shooting guys. It was great. So anyone who says Gambling's Banner is OP now never had to verse it then.
Yeah, that's a crazy combo.
Yeah. But now their role is a little bit different. So I used to take about 4 or 5 of them sprinkled into my armies. I don't anymore because I'm pretty much now purely playing a Legendary Legion for Rohan that they're not in. And I'll kind of go over that when we talk about that Legendary Legion. But I used to take 4 or 5 of them sprinkled in my army because they're shot 3. So they're hitting like an elf. So when you move, you can shoot on a 4+. Pretty much when you're playing Rohan, you're always moving. So I would take them, and then on objective games or on games like Reconnoiter, where you're trying to get models across the table, and if you're broken, these guys are probably going to stay on the field because you can just use a hero steadfast, and boom, they're good.
I think that's something that really it could get overlooked. And we both play Legendary Legions when we play Rohan because I play Rohan a good bit. I've actually podiumed several times playing Rohan. Uh, but for a lot of objective games like domination or capturing control, the ability for a guy to use any hero on the field, and it says use a friendly hero model standfast, so it's not specifically one, it's anyone that passes their standfast and they stick around. So I find like Storm the Camp, for example, being Rohan, I personally think that Rohan, if you're not playing it fully mounted, you better hoard it out like all crazy, get out. But if you're playing with Rohan Outriders, you're probably going to use them mounted to go grab objectives, and that could be something
Yep.
really good for,
Yeah.
like I said, Storm the Camp.
Yeah, they're a really solid unit. And here's where I'm kind of like,
And the defense 4 is not bad either.
No, it's not.
Defense 4 is pretty good.
No, yeah, it is. They can go down to crossbows and stuff pretty quick.
Yeah.
But honestly, in a lot of games, people are going to be using their shooting to try and take your heroes out off horses or your royal guards, so they kind of normally get overlooked. But that's since we're talking about Legendary Legions, since Legendary Legions are so prominent with Rohan, they tend to be an overlooked unit, even though I think they're a really good skirmish unit. I think if I was not playing that Riders of Thade and Legendary Legion like I have been, then I would probably still sprinkle some of my army just to have that ability to have troops that won't run, 3-up shot. They're great, and they have extra rider, so if they get thrown off their horse, they can re-roll their dice, which pretty much every Rohan, every Rohan model has extra rider.
I actually just took a quick glance through the Legendary Legions, and 2 of them you can actually take Rohan Outriders.
Yep, the Thadrid is one I know you can.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm going to guess you can take one in Helmsguard?
Correct.
Yep.
This is why he's the master of Rohan.
And those 2 would be really good. We'll go over those like when we go over the Legendary Legions, because I actually have a lot of opinions on those.
Spoiler alert, next review is Legendary Legions.
So the next unit I'm going to go over, because there's another unit now, is Sons of Ale. So these guys are a relatively expensive cab unit. They're fight 4, strength 4, defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4. They have expert rider, riders of Ale. While within 6 inches of Ale the Young, Sons of Ale gain +1 to their attack value. So anyone who's unfamiliar, Sons of Ale used to be like a berserker on a horse. They had 2 attack base. They were just solid units. Again, this is a unit I would take 3 or 4, maybe even 5 or 6, depending on point values.
Yeah, in my a good amount. I remember them.
In my Rohan armies.
They were beefy. I think they were like 22 points at that time.
They were. They got a little bit of a point decrease, but they lost their attack and they lost their 12-inch horses.
Yes, that's true. They did.
Their horse used to be able to move 12 inches, but they are armored horses still, which is really good. But I used to take a bunch. But when basically Rohan, the game has changed so much in terms of the structure of building armies. So this is one thing I'm saying. Like, Rohan there's so many options for it, because you can take Ale the Young, and then I would say if you take him, then you take a lot of Sons of Ale.
Yep.
Because if you take him, you can't take any other named hero except for like just captains and stuff, I think.
Captain and King's Huntsman, I believe.
Yeah, so then you're going to want to have those fight 4 berserkers running around smashing things. But that's basically that. I think that they're a good unit. I think that if you're going to take them, though, you take them with Ale, because their strength 4 is great, their fight 4 is great, but those things can be mitigated with the army bonus and with Theoden's ability to make everyone, +1 of their fight if they charge. So,
well, I think it's interesting because now that I'm looking at it, so I'm a fiefdoms player, as you know well. So they're the same amount of points as a Swan Knight of Dolan Roth on armored horse with lance, and I'm debating in my head which one I would like better. So they're both fight 4 base. Sons of Earl get the strength 4 over strength 3. They're both defense 6. They're both 1 attack, 1 wound. And they're courage 4. That's something not to laugh at because I believe Swan Knights are only courage 3.
They're 4.
Are they
Swan
4?
Knights they are 4.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. But still, that's pretty. They're pretty much so point for point. You got one bit better in strength, and then you also have your special rule as expert rider. Now, obviously, the Swan Knights, their special rule is +1 to their fight value if they're within 3 inches of Immerhill.
Yeah.
But your special rule is a 6-inch bubble. So even comparing special rules and then looking at what you have for war gear, you have the axe. So you have the ability to become strength 5 with piercing strike. And
actually,
if you charge, you get to strength 6.
+1 to your strength. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm not real sure which one I kind of am leaning towards Sons of Earl being a bit better.
I think
if you play them, and even if you don't play them with Earl, they seem
even if you don't, so as someone who used to take a bunch of them, I can tell you when they charge and win a fight, they're killing the model that they're winning the fight against. And I've had Sons of Ale kill heroes. They're basically, I think they're optimized with Ale. I think you could take some in a Rohan army without him. Yeah. But in my mind, and I'll go over this when we talk about this unit. In my mind, there's one unit that kind of makes them, they're not totally obsolete, but it makes them, in my opinion, just a tad bit a tad bit obsolete, but they're not obsolete.
They're not, not as useful.
Yeah. They're, but I think that I think if you wanted to play them, I think they'd be great with Ale. I think they'd be good in a Rohan army if you decide you don't want to take a Legendary Legion, you want to be like a Rohan hipster, like how I used to be, and then you just take Ale, 12 of these guys in a warband, or 15 because he's a hero of valor.
I thought he was a legend. Wow. Okay.
He might be a legend.
No, he's a valor.
Yeah, you take 15 of them, then you take some captains. You're talking about a really hard hitting force. I think it'd be a good idea, a good army.
I wouldn't mind trying to see if I could shoehorn in a couple of them in, like I said, a regular Rohan, and just use them as true strike units. Go for the piercing strike, go for the charge, because then you're gonna have 2 strength 6 attacks coming at somebody, and if you win, they're knocked prone, so it's 4.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next unit I'll go over is the Riders of Rohan. Riders of Rohan is like the most versatile unit that the army has. It is the possibly, in my opinion, the most versatile cav unit in the game. They can do everything. They can shoot. They can run stuff over. They can go take objectives. They can do pretty much anything. So here's their stat line. So they're fight 3, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. They have a shield or axe, shield, bow, or horse. Or sorry, sword or axe, shield, bow, or horse, and horse. So right off the bat, I'm going to go over the special rule, one of the special rules for the Rohan army. So right off the bat, gotta go all the way to the army bonus. Okay, so Riders of Rohan within this army list do not count towards bow limit.
And that's not even an army bonus. That's just a rule for the list.
That's just an additional rule.
Yeah.
So I normally, and they've had this rule since the Kingdoms of Men book came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I have learned when you play Rohan, especially if you're versing someone who's outnumbering you, which you're always going to probably be outnumbered because you're the way I play him is all cav. You could play them in infantry blocks, and we'll talk about that. But getting those bow shots off and out shooting your opponent, and making them come to you is like so key to make your Rohan army that successful. That's one reason why I used to take Outriders, because you sprinkle a few in to have like elf shots, but the Riders of Rohan, they're going to be doing a majority of the shooting in your army. So they can shoot, and then when you go into combat, you charge in. Your strength 4 because your army bonus. The army bonus for Rohan is models in this list get +1 to their strength when they charge,
If they're
and
cavalry.
then if they're cavalry, and it makes a rider of Rohan very powerful when they charge in and win that fight. You're talking about strength 4 cav. That's one reason why I think some of their elite units, like the Sons and the Outriders, they're still really good options. And honestly, I would still take them if they were available in the list, the Legendary Legion that I like. But I have played them without the Legendary Legion, and I did take these guys. But Riders of Rohan are just your great versatile unit that you're going to pretty much have at least a handful of in all of your lists, including Legendary Legions. I imagine you're going to have a handful of them in there as well. You got any thoughts, Jason?
Well, I think the one thing you didn't mention is their special rule, Arise Riders of Theoden.
Yes.
I think that's probably their best one.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. So if a model is within 12 inches of Theoden and has cavalry keyword, a model with this special rule receives +1 bonus to their fight value on a turn of which they charged. So we're talking your riders are also fight for when they charge. And guys, I'm pretty much just being honest. If you play your cards right, you make your opponent come to you with your shooting that the riders of Rohan and your Outriders put out, then you're probably always going to get the first charge. Now, there are some scenarios where you won't, like when you're fighting monsters on Fellbeast or whatever. But getting that charge, especially when you're fighting units that are fight 3 and you charge with these guys, you're winning on that tied dice roll. You can obliterate an orc shield wall in a turn. Now, if it's happened.
Yeah, you're getting that charge and puts you at that fight 4 meta that we all see currently.
And it's kind of weird because Riders of Rohan are also one of those units. So back in the Big Blue rulebook, back before the Kingdom's Men came out, back before a lot of the Journey books came out, Riders of Rohan were they weren't as good as they are now, and they've gotten better progressively. So, for instance, they were fight 3 then. They didn't have the ability to have 100% bow limit with the Riders. So then the other options, like the Outriders or the Sons of Ale or the Royal Guard, where that, it's like, well, why would I take these guys? But now it's like one of those things, even in last edition when the Kingdoms of Men came out and they made them 100% bow limit, and then Eric and Brand had his rule for the Westfold Red Shields.
Mm-hmm.
It was honestly, I would just say you needed to have a bunch of these guys, and I think I still think they are probably the most versatile cav unit in the game. Now there are cav units that do things better than them, like Knights of Dol Amroth are better fighters. Sons of Vale are better fighters, but these guys can also shoot.
I think they are probably the perfect medium cav for the game.
Yes.
And it makes sense because it's Rohan. They are the Horselords. Yep. I mean, I was actually watching a video, and apparently Rohan in Rohirrim language, because Rohan had their own language, and apparently it was very guttural. But Rohan stood for Horselords. So whenever you're saying Rohan, home of the Horselords, you're saying Horselords, home of the Horselords. Little funny tidbit there, I've read.
And I haven't gone over any of their these guys' word gear yet. They can take a warhorn, a banner, or throwing spears. So you can take throwing spears with your riders, which is another option. If I give models throwing spears, I tend to give them to my Royal Guard.
Yeah, I agree. If you're shooting, you might as well give it to something else. More shots.
But they're relatively they're defense 5s. So they're relatively sturdy.
Mm-hmm.
They're like elf bows and stuff can bring them down. But I mean, with your ability to move fast and your ability to move and shoot, and if you can move 5 inches and shoot, it's insane.
Yeah, they make for very good cutting abilities, which is what you were saying, is make your opponent come to you.
Yep. So that's the most versatile unit for Rohan. I think it's probably the best medium cav in the game.
Yeah.
I
mean, especially some cav are better. Like Morgul Knights have terror with lances and stuff, and they're heavier hitting. So are Knights of Dol Amroth. Some cav are cheaper and lighter, like Khan's Horsemen, and I think it's the Dunlending Horsemen. But overall, the rider Rohan just has so much versatility. And like you said, it's got an axe in the profile. So if you get the charge off and piercing strike, you can get up to strength 5. So this isn't the unit that you were alluding to that can replace Sons of Earl, but it can make it so that you don't really need to have Sons of Earl.
Yeah, if you're gonna play Sons of Errol, I think you'd want to have a handful of them still in your army. But I think in that list, because that's just a different way to play the Rohan, basically, is the appendices characters.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go into the next unit. This is probably Rohan's best special unit, in my opinion. And it's actually one of those units. So the Rohan Royal Guard. So Rohan Royal Guard in this edition became phenomenal. Now in the last 2 editions, they were a good unit. I used to take a handful of them, and then I kind of started sifting them out and putting in Sons of Errol because I'd rather have the strength 4
with 2 attack.
3 attack models on the charge. But in this edition,
they've used
Royal Guard, Royal Guard have now become so. My list, pretty much every Rohan list I've made in this edition so far have had a warband of 12, and I always park them in with Theoden because we'll go over that in a sec. But their Royal Guard is a relatively cheap special unit. They have Fight 4, Strength 3, Defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, Courage 3. They have heavy armor, sword, and a shield in their profile. You can equip them with a banner, horse, or throwing spears. Normally, I equip all of them with horses, and if I have some extra points, like 6 extra points, I'll give 3 of them throwing spears. They have Bodyguard, which is one reason why I think that they're phenomenal.
Agreed.
And they've had Bodyguard in all the other editions, but
it's really come into its own in this edition.
Yeah, because they're units like Dead of Dunharrow with Harbinger of Evil.
Yeah.
Yep. Their armies, specifically built to where you can't charge them, and knowing that these guys are gonna be able to charge in. I'm gonna go over their special rule real quick. Arise, Riders of Theoden.
Oh, hey, that sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. So basically, they have the exact same rule that the Royal Riders of Rohan have, where if they charge, they're within 12 inches of Theoden, they get +1 of their fight value. So you're talking about fight 5 troops. This is phenomenal, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. So you're talking about you're playing Rohan. You're versing Iron Hills. Iron Hills, you charge that you. If I'm playing Iron Hills, I'm normally gonna have these guys. So an army like Iron Hills, not like fight 4 shield wall. I'm gonna have these Royal Guard. I'm gonna have my heroes vanguard it and take that shield wall on head on. Your fight 5, accompanied with your strength 4 on the charge, and the fact that your Bodyguard, you're hitting hard and you're winning fights.
Mm-hmm.
You're beating a lot of armies now. The elves are not normally. I haven't seen as many elves as I've seen in previous tournaments, like the last 3 or 4 tournaments. But these guys are a really good unit, and they can crack fight 4 shield walls like Knights of Dalamroth on foot, like Minas Tirith, Fountain Guard support shield walls. So it's just a really solid Isengard, another good one. So it's just a really good solid unit at being able to hit really hard when you charge and do what you do best. Roll a lot of dice. It's probably my favorite special unit in this edition for Rohan. Actually, maybe just in general, because I love having fight 5 cav on the charge.
Yeah, I think they're definitely my favorite troop. I won't lie. I've never used Outriders, so I can't speak for them, and I've never used Sons of Earl. But Rohan Royal Guard, it's like you said. I don't have a full warband of 12, so I take as many as I have, which is 10 painted right now. But if whatever list I build, I have at least those 10 in there, and then fit in
Um,
Riders of Rohan around it.
I've toyed around with the idea of just taking Royal Guard. I think that is a good idea on paper, but I think ultimately when you're playing Rohan, you want to make your opponent come to you. So I still think you want.
Yeah, you need those post shots.
I kind of make it like a 50-50. I like having half Royal Guard, half Riders, because that way you still got at least 12 shots in your army, 12 bow shots.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much how, like, as in the last edition, like because I would take some Royal Guard in my army just for Bodyguard. So in terms of the composition of my Rohan in this edition and last edition, it hasn't changed much in terms of how many riders I take to how many special units. Basically, all my special unit slots now are just dedicated to Royal Guard. I think, guys, if you got a Rohan army, let's say you're versing your friend, I think that it's the way to go. Take Royal Guard. 12 of them. Try and take 12.
Yeah, it's a good number, because then you can charge them against any number of, like you said, a Terror army. You can get a lot of charges in then. Just one-on-ones if it's like an Angmar army, and if you charge, you're going to have 2 attacks, so you'd be winning there. But, yeah, they're definitely the best troop for Rohan.
Okay, so I'm going to breeze over. So that's all the like kind of cav units. I'm going to kind of breeze through these guys really fast because so there's a captain of Rohan. I'm going to be 100% honest, guys. I have almost never taken a captain of Rohan in any army build unless you have to. So, like, for instance, when I play tested the Helmhammer Hand Legendary Legion, you have to take him because you can only have one character. But Rohan has so many named heroes in the list that you just don't really need them. Now, granted,
you really don't.
Granted, they do have March, but there are a lot of other heroes in this list that also have March. So, but a captain of Rohan is a fight 4, strength 4, defense 5 base, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. They have armor, sword, or an axe. You can give them a horse, bow, heavy armor, shield, throwing spear. And then they also have the Arise Riders of Theoden rule.
I didn't even realize they had that. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so they can be a pretty versatile unit in terms of they can shoot. You got some bowfire of might behind it. They're pretty sturdy with defense 6 or 7, kind of depending on how you upgrade them.
Mm-hmm.
But then they can also add up in points when you start upgrading them.
Yeah, they get to be like 70 points real fast.
So I'm going to go over the Warriors of Rohan. These are just the foot guys. A really cheap unit. They're fight 3, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3, move 6. They can't take a horse. Cannot take a horse. They can take a warhorn, banner, throwing spears, bow, shield. So I play tested before Legendary Legions came out. I actually play tested Foot Rohan back in the day, and I lost 3 tournament games in a row with him.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna put it like this, guys. If you want to play a sword and board shield wall army, play Gondor. If you want to play,
not even really a sword and board, since it's not spears, it's throwing spears.
Yep,
so you can't
exactly.
use sword. Yeah.
If you're just playing base Rohan, you can't use your throwing spears as supports. So I'd recommend, I can't recommend, if you want to play them, go for it. I'm just gonna say, playing mounted Rohan, in my opinion, is the way to go because they're just so much better. But if you were inclined to play a foot Rohan army, you can sprinkle in Royal Guard. You can sprinkle in maybe a few riders if you really wanted to. You do tend to have a high model limit. You tend to have a pretty high model count in your army, but they go down pretty quick.
Yeah, outside of the Helmsteed Legendary Legion, which we'll talk about in another video, I don't really see you playing them on foot. I mean, that Legendary Legion is custom tailored with bonuses for playing them on foot.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I agree with Joe. All mounted is definitely the way to go. Just the versatility of having it all mounted, it's really good.
So there's another profile I'm going to go over real quick. The King's Huntsman. I've taken the King's Huntsman a couple times in practice games. Just test him out. He's good on paper. He's probably the best archer hero in Rohan. But again, he can't take a horse. So I pretty much almost never take him. But he is fight 3, shot 3, strength 4, defense 5, 1 attack, 2 wounds, courage 4, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He has a long bow. He has armor, sword, a long bow. And then he has the Master Archer rule. King's Huntsman only fails in the way rolls on a 1. Additionally, each time this model slays an enemy hero or monster, he restores his might to its starting level.
That's pretty good, but it's so situational. It's very rare it's going to happen. Because you're good, so you're not shooting into combat. So
no, and it's like
very easily.
It's one of those things where, like I said about the captain, there's so many other named characters you can take for Rohan. He does have heroic accuracy, which is a big deal.
Is strength 3, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I mean, he's got a better chance of wounding. He'd be wounding Gundabad ogres on a 5, but the fact that it would take 3 turns for him to do that, that's if he wounds every single turn. And yeah, he's got some points of might to be able to do it. If you're Rohan and you're waiting 3 turns to get into combat, depending on the scenario, you're waiting 3 turns too long.
Yep. So, King's Huntsman, I've never taken him to a tournament. I've taken him in a few test games. He's done not much for me. He tends to die pretty quick when combat hits.
Or miss every shot.
Or he'll miss every shot. Or I'll get it set up to where I wound that monster. I'll shoot my other bows into a monster and then save him for last. And he will roll 1 to wound. So that happens too. So the next profile, we're starting to get into the good ones, is Ale the Young. Ale the Young is an absolute beast. Anyone who doesn't know this, I used to take him in last edition. I would take him pretty much over Theoden, in terms of he swapped the roles with Theoden in the current edition for me.
Yeah.
He also so he's fight 5, strength 4, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might with an asterisk, 2 will, 2 fate. He has a kind of a caveat. If your force contains Ale Young, any other named hero models from the Rohan army list will automatically lose its army bonus. Also, if your army includes Ale Young, every alliance will be impossible allies, once with the exception of Minas Tirith, so long as Minas Tirith includes no named models. So, you basically, if you take him, you have to take him in captains, unless you wanted to be red allies, which I think would be a mistake, because your army bonus is very valuable if you're playing Mounted Rohan.
Well, your army bonus, now that I think about it, your army bonus is just that +1 to your strength for your cabinets when you charge. Yeah, that makes you a better hitter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's something you want to give up, because strength 3 against a defense 6 shield wall or defense 7 shield wall, like you were talking about, can be really hard to crack. Having that strength 4 when you charge is better, but you could still get there with piercing strikes. Now, granted, it's going to make you a little more vulnerable, but I've never really thought about it. Where if you could possibly add the Young in and then some of those Sons of Earl, like you were talking about, and still get Thade for the strength for the fight 4 and everything.
Yeah, if you wanted to go that route, I could see you taking a lot of Sons because you're strength 4 anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then take Thade with some guys to add bow shots. But Ale's become he used to be a 2 attack, now he's a 3 attack. He used to be 2 wounds, now he's 3 wounds. So I think in terms of being a standalone hero, he has the chops to do it.
Yeah.
He does. So he does have Feral. Yeah, there we go. That's the name of his horse. Ale's noble steed is an armored horse with a movement of 12. So he is an armored horse that moves 12 inches, like he did in last. Yep, like he did in the last edition. And it's an absolute beast. He can charge really far distances, and it's hard to kill his horse. And I used to love taking him. He also has throwing spears.
Yeah, I was about to say that. He's got throwing spears. That's not something to laugh at.
No, and he's assassinated quite a few guys with them throwing spears for me.
Yeah, he did that to me a few times.
So he has heroic resolve, heroic strike, heroic strength, and heroic defense. Those are all really good heroic actions to know especially for a hero that's going to be your leader.
Mm-hmm.
He has Horselord, which is a new rule, which means you can spend your fate from your hero to prevent wounds done to your horse, which is every Rohan hero, including the captain, have that. And I think it's a really good rule for Rohan to have. I think it's a really good rule for any mounted hero to have in particular, because there's nothing like getting your horse shot out from under you in like the first turn of shooting.
Yeah.
This way you can prevent that. It's kind of tricky. He has 2 fate. So you can say, I'm gonna allocate 1 fate for his horse and then 1 fate for him, and hope he doesn't get crushed by a cave troll or something. But then he has a rule. He has a rule called Legendary Hero. The first time each turn that Ale expends a point of might, roll a d6 on a 4+. The might is free and does not reduce Ale's store of might. This is a really good rule because I've had games where I've rolled nothing but 4s and had pretty much might for days with him. And back when I would take him with Amir or whoever, we're talking about a lot of might in that army. And then it's being stretched out because of that. It's great. I think it's a good rule. I think him and the Sons would work really good together. In fact, maybe I'll play test that army soon. Thinking about it now. So that's Ale. I'm gonna go on. I'm actually gonna cover Hama. He is a. I'm actually gonna cover all. Are we gonna go over the guys from Gondor War as well?
Yeah, because they're in there. Dernhelm,
Okay.
Darwin.
So they're. I'm gonna go over I'm just gonna cover all 3 of them. There are 3 Royal Guard heroes that you can take. You can take Darwin, you can take Hama, and you can take Gamling. Hama and Gamling are both Fight 4, Strength 4, Defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds. They both have 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. All 3 of them have Sworn Protector to Theoden. All 3 of them have Horselords. All 3 of them have Expert Riders. Gamling and Hama have Heroic Defense. I believe Darwin only knows Heroic Strike.
And March.
He has March, okay.
Huge.
Yes, it is. So each of these heroes they're virtually the same. Darwin's Fight 5. He's a little bit fightier.
Fight 5, Defense 7, and he's got Bodyguard.
Oh, he has Bodyguard, not Sworn Protector.
Yeah, because he's the chief of the King's Knights, so he's the chief of the Royal Guards.
Okay, so I'll go over him separately then. But so Hama and Gamling are virtually the same stat wise. Mm-hmm. And they both can take horses. Hama can take a shield. Gamling cannot, but he can take the Royal Standard of Rohan.
Yep.
The Royal
March.
Oh, he does have March. Okay, good. So like the thing about Rohan is a lot of the heroes have March in it, so that's why I'm saying like you don't really need a captain.
Yeah.
Because you're probably gonna take Theoden in your army. Theoden has March. You're probably gonna take not maybe now they kind of nerfed it a little bit, but you're probably gonna take Gamling, who has March. You're probably gonna take Darwin. I actually forgot he had March, and I believe Amir has March. Could be wrong.
No, he does not. He only knows 2.
So the Royal Standard of Rohan actually has been changed a little bit, but I'm gonna go and read it from the wording in the book for now, and we'll go over the changes after. So the Precious Heirloom is a banner. Additionally, any Rohan hero model within 3 inches of the Royal Standard at the start of any turn that have no might remaining automatically add 1 might point to their store. This cannot take a hero beyond its starting level. Gamling suffers no penalties for carrying the Royal Standard of Rohan. So they changed it because by the wording in this and how it's always been is you can pretty much what I used to do is I would encircle like 4, because I normally try and take 4 or 5 heroes when I play Rohan. You encircle Gamling, you pump all of them back up with might, and then you go back into the fight. Heroic combat, then encircle them again. So you keep doing it. You keep going out. Heroic combat, and then you go back to Gamling the next turn to get might back.
You're basically slingshotting yourself back towards your guy to get another point of might for the next turn.
Yeah, and the 3 inches is you can spread that out. You can do if you keep him central. My one gripe about Gamling, and actually a lot of people I'm gonna say it straight up. Even when this banner was considered quote unquote OP, unless it was the last edition with Outriders, or sorry, 2 editions ago with Outriders, I actually wouldn't take Gambling, just because I feel like he's a really expensive model. When you have him on the horse, when you have him with the banner, I'd rather, because
Totally.
pretty much for his points cost, you can take him. You can take another hero.
You can take
You can take
Amir.
you can take Amir. You can take Darrowwine, and you can take more riders for the cost of Gambling and the banner. And I actually tend to like Darrowwine. We'll go over him in a sec.
Yeah, Darwin and Elfhelm are almost the same exact points as Gambling with the banner on a horse.
Now, I will say this though: playing Rohan, you want to be able to call heroic movements. You want to be able to charge and move first. You want to be able to get the charges, I should say. So having the might for days with at least one hero is pretty valuable. And then you do have a banner, and it's wielded by a hero that has heroic defense. Mm-hmm. So he himself is relatively survivable. But I've learned that people will target him because they know what he can do. Now Darrowwine, he has a special rule where if he's in combat, he can call a free heroic combat, and then he can, if he's within 12 inches of Theoden, and then he has to be able to move into the same fight as Theoden or into the closest possible fight, I believe. So he can have might for days too. I mean, as long as he's alive, you can just keep calling heroic combats. Now, in my current list of Rohan, Darrowwine actually took over Gambling's spot. Because I used to take Gambling.
Yeah, Theoden has to be engaged in combat just to add to that.
Theoden has to be engaged in a fight.
And it says you have to move. You have to use the movement, which is funny. It's within 12 inches, but you can only move 10.
Yeah.
So you have to get as close as possible. So I would assume that means if there's no control zones and you can get or as far 10 inches. He's 12 inches away. You have to move the full 10. You couldn't stop an inch short to get into a combat, add the attacks, because it literally says you have to move as far as you possibly can. So you can set yourself up for that, of course, so that you could do it.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this, guys, when you play Rohan, don't expect to pick him up and be really good with him, like in the period of a couple games. Honestly, it's going to require a lot of learning how to move, learning how to initiate combats, learning how to maneuver your pieces. Yeah, leave yourself a reserve. Maneuver your pieces around, because ultimately, when you play Rohan, the first turn, the charge turn, your first charge turn is very important, and you want to set yourself up so the next turn, you're going to be able to do it again. And if you aren't, so it's probably going to go down to a 50-50 dice roll in terms of your opponent's not going to want you to do that again, where you charge and kill half his army. So you're going to want to set yourself up to where you can at least get some models in that can charge, including heroes. So it's one of those things, guys. Like I said, I've played them for so long. I've played them in a ton of games. I can't even honestly count how many games I played Rohan. So
I would say, I said at the beginning, I've podiumed a few times with Rohan, and I have nowhere near mastering them. There are still plenty of games where I just completely failed to set myself up in a good position, and then end up with my army getting charged and no possible way to countercharge the next turn, or getting hemmed in a position with no way to get myself out of it. And then my big 40 millimeter bases are getting charged by 2 or 3 guys each every turn by my opponent, and I'm getting swamped and destroyed. And you're dropping like flies in. So Joe's right. This is not an army. I would say it's definitely a medium to upper tier army to learn. Now, obviously, some folks are going to be a lot better than me, so you'll get it a lot quicker.
I think that
take some time. Don't expect to be a beginner and just walk in and be like, "Hey, I'm going to master this today." No, that's not going to.
I think that they lend themselves well to newer players in terms of they're really versatile. They can do a lot of things. You charge and you run over someone's army. But then you got to start saying, well, it depends who your opponent is. It depends how many numbers they have. It depends on what scenario it is. It's like there's so many variables to it. But Rohan will win Lords of Battle against a lot of armies. They'll win to the death against a lot of armies. But then when you start talking about, for instance, two of my biggest losses of Rohan were actually before I got the Legendary Legion. It was actually in this. I took all the pieces from this book, the army list I shared earlier. was basically the list I took to Pennsylvania, and it was before they nerfed.
Nature's Wrath.
It was the one that
Wrath of
Elrond. Wrath of Bryn. It was before they nerfed that, and I had all my heroes set up to where I can try and control it. And two of my opponents were playing High Elves. Both of them had a spam of it, as in they had Arwen and Elrond. And both times, most of my army got dropped to the ground, which when you're playing Rohan is terrible, especially because you're already outnumbered. And half my army was on the ground.
You lose
I rolled
expensive horses.
Yeah, you lose your horses. You lose almost all of your knockdown power, all of your power to be able to charge in, win fights, and kill stuff. So when you're playing an army like that, when you're versing stuff like that, you got to be really weary of that, especially like monsters and stuff. That's another thing, getting hurled. So before before I go into tactics here, let's keep going with the profiles because we still have a bunch. There's Grimbold of Grimslade. He's a model that I've play tested him a few times. A very similar. I actually have never taken Hammer, by the way, in any of my lists. So I think he's a good profile. But Rohan just has so many heroes. So Grimbold of Grimslade, I've taken him a few practice games. He's gotten better in this edition, but he tends to fall short. He cannot take a horse, which I know there's quite a few memes about that.
A few is an understatement.
Yeah, he's fight 5, movement 6, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He's also a hero of fortitude. I haven't been going over this. All the I believe
everyone's been fortitude so far.
Okay, all right, good. So he has a rule. If your army includes
Earl of Valor, but we talked about that already.
Yeah, if your army includes Grimbold, you can upgrade any number of warriors in his warband to Helamingas. This costs 1 point. Helamingas are strength 4 rather than strength 3. It's a good rule, but when you start talking about warriors of Rohan and how kind of meh they are, you're talking about some pretty expensive models to upgrade to strength 4. I mean, honestly, by the time you give them that, but by the time you give them that and a shield,
the same as Warriorman's Tear for the shield.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about guys that will get chopped down by a lot of stuff, and I mean, honestly, Grimbold's one of those guys where if he had a horse, he might be a pretty good pick. He does have Mighty Blow, so every time he does a wound, he does 2 wounds, and he has a 2-handed axe in his profile. So he hits hard, but he's on foot, and he just the word for me that would describe him would be he dies a lot. He dies a lot for me.
Mostly see our battle reports that we did, the narrative scenarios for the Fourth Horizon, and he got run over like a turd.
And that's pretty much how it goes for me. He actually died to a Corsair Reaver one game. One Corsair Reaver killed him.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Because, I mean, the 2-handed axe alone kind of stinks, just because it's the only weapon in his profile. Therefore, he takes -1 to his dice rolls every turn.
And I was wrong. He does not have Expert Rider or Horselord, but he can't take a horse. Because I said every hero in the list has it, but he doesn't.
Well, neither does the King's Huntsman, but the King's Huntsman is the same way. So,
but these guys. These guys are kind of infantry-centric heroes, but again, my opinion on infantry Rohan is you got to take him in one of the new legendary legions, which Grimbold I think can be in one of them. So the next guy I'm going to go over is Erkenbrand. Erkenbrand is a fan favorite of mine. I used to take him in every list I had. Erkenbrand was the first pick, the first hero option I would fill. It's changed in this edition. I pretty much put another hero in his place, and we'll go over that hero. I'll let actually Jason go over the hero. So he's fight 5, strength 4, defense 7, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. So as you guys can tell, a lot of Rohan heroes have 3 might. So I mean, you're gonna always have a ton of might in a Rohan army. Yeah. He has the Horn of Helm Hammerhand. This is a war horn that adds +2 courage rather than +1. However, the horn only affects friendly Rohan models. And that's a big deal because people used to pair this horn up with elves. They used to pair this horn up with Dead of Dawn Harrow. So you're talking about courage 7 elves and courage 8 dead guys. So they kind of made it thematic, making it Rohan.
Back before alliances actually mattered.
And that was the reason why I would take him in a lot of the games, because you're talking about Courage 5 Riders of Rohan, Courage 5, Courage 6 Sons of Vale. You're talking about they don't care about Harbinger of Evil. They don't care about Terror, unless you just roll hot garbage, which has happened. So
really good for your heroes too, because your heroes are only Courage 5 at the most. Even your best heroes are Courage 5 at the most. So getting Courage 7 heroes puts them on the level of like the Aragorns and Gandalf tiers.
Yeah. So here's where his profile kind of. So he has 2 heroic actions. He has March, again another Rohan hero knows March, and he has heroic strength. He can also take a horse. So for me, I really like heroes that can strike in this edition.
Yeah, him losing out on strike really hurt.
He can go in there and fight a lot of infantry. He can go in there and fight a lot of other heroes. But the fact that he does not know strike has kind of been a deterrent for me, because I know he would be a pretty juicy target for someone. But he has another one of the rules. So if your army includes Erkenbrand, you can upgrade any number of riders of Rohan and his warband at Westfold Red Shields. At a cost of 1 point per model, Westfold Red Shields count as being in the range of a banner if they're within 3 inches of Erkenbrand, basically. So it's one of those things where a rider of Rohan's already good, and they're not cheap units to have.
No, it makes it the same cost as a Royal Guard.
I would, if I were to start upgrading guys to banners, then I would consider just saving those points and maybe throwing gambling in my army. It's a good rule. It's thematic, but it's just something I'm not sure I would invest points in. That's kind of why Erkenbrand is no longer in my Rohan list, just because he's kind of lost viability.
He lost a few things. Like you said, the Horn of Hammerhand now only affects Rohan. He can't strike. And under the old edition, the Westfold Wedge Shield upgrade actually made your guys fight 4.
Yeah, your riders to fight 4, and he was the man for Rohan. Yes. But
that's kind of your bonus for being within 12 inches of Theoden. It's kind of Theoden is honestly really the one that's replaced him because of that. Because Theoden's base point cost is the same as him until you upgrade him, and then he gives the guys the 12-inch range, and that's even better than 3 or paying a point. And then his heroics are still better than Erkenbrand's as well.
Okay. So there are a ton of heroes in Rohan. We were going to try and make this a 30-minute long video, and I think we're probably surpassed that.
Yeah, we're past.
So we have two other profiles now. We have Eowyn, Shieldmane of Rohan, and Mariotic Brandybuck, Knight of the Mark. So we're going to go over them. Yes, we will go over them. But I was thinking, Jason, you can cover Elfhelm and Durnhelm.
Oh, okay. My favorites.
Basically, guys, Eowyn is a minor hero. Erkenbrand is a hero of fortitude. I don't know if I said that. Eowyn's a minor hero. She has 2 might, 2 will, 2 fate. She's fight 5, strength 3, defense 3, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5. She knows heroic resolve, heroic strike, heroic strength. She can take a horse. She can take armor. She can take shield. She can take throwing spears. I used to take Eowyn quite a bit. She's actually gotten better in this edition. She used to have 1 wound and 2 fate. Now she has 2 wounds and 2 fate, so she can survive a lot better. But she also has lost viability to me in terms of she used to be able to lead 12 troops. She was around 35 points on a horse or something like that in last edition. Now she's gotten a point increase. And when you start talking about how you, depending on how you upgrade her, she could be a somewhat expensive hero. And honestly, her role's been swapped. Honestly, I didn't take her to the tournament in Philly. I took Daedric instead of her, basically. But I think she's a good pick if you're trying to play a smaller points game with Rohan. She is relatively versatile in terms of the heroic she knows, and she can fight big stuff. And she's strength 3, but she's strength 4 in the charge. She has Horselords and Expert Rider. Then she has a special rule called I shall kill you if you touch him. If Theoden is in your force and is slain, place a 25mm marker where he fell. Eowyn must move directly towards this marker during each of her move phases if she is able to. Once Eowyn has moved within 3 inches of this marker, she may not may not willingly move farther than 3 inches away from this at any reason of the remainder of the game. Additionally, while within 3 inches of the marker, Eowyn becomes fearless, must reroll any failed to wound rolls. In addition, she also receives +1 to wound when making strikes against the model that slew Theoden.
So she's really scary, but she's kind of pinned in a 6-inch diameter.
Yeah, and honestly, guys, we'll talk about Theoden. I'll talk about this when we talk about Theoden, but it could be a pretty big hindrance to you, especially because you might want her to go do an objective somewhere. I mean, a Rohan army is going to have quite a few heroes in it, but having a piece that you want to be able to move freely on the board, becoming pinned on a certain location to me is a pretty big deterrent.
Especially because she's one of the ones that has strike, like you said.
Yes, you might want her to go fight. Yes, exactly. And then there's Mary. Mary is a really cheap hero. He's an independent hero. He's fight 3, strength 2, fight 4. Or sorry, strength fight 3, strength 2, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4, 1 might, 1 will, 2 fate. He has armor and a dagger. He knows heroic strike as well. You can give him an elven cloak. You can give him a pony. You can give him a shield. He has resistance to magic, throw stones of 8 inches, and strength of 1. I have never taken Mary in a Rohan list ever, except for Durnhelm.
Yep.
And I'll let you cover Durnhelm. But basically, guys, Mary, it's kind of one of those things where the Durnhelm profile for me took over Eowyn's position, and I never took Mary, but it kind of took over his position. If you wanted to play these 2 pieces in a list for pure theme, if you wanted to take a cheap 20-some point guy just to lead some troops, or he's an independent, so he can't lead troops.
Well,
you guys can go for it.
I would see him being useful for, because you can drop independent heroes with other in a warband with other heroes. You could put him in, say, like Theoden's warband, because Theoden's a legend, and put him on a pony, so he's going to move 8 inches, so he's not going to get left too far behind. And then having a point of will and resistance to magic could make him maybe a mini AoE defender against, like you were saying earlier, you got threatened by Wrath of Brunian. But like I've said in previous videos, with Wrath of Brunian being brought down, and the other one, crap, I forgot the name.
So there was a tactic with Mary in the previous edition, and it probably was viable up until them changing the banner. There was actually a all-hero Rohan list you can take. People you would take Mary in the list, and then he would get a might back, and you would just use his might for heroic movements.
That makes sense.
But then he'd get a might back every turn. So that's where his role was in that list. I really don't know where you would fit him in, like what kind of role he would take in a Rohan list now. But
that's it.
well, even then, like I said, Durnhelm kind of takes that. Yeah. But anyway, what I'll have you do is go over Elfhelm and Durnhelm real quick.
Sure.
And then I'll go over Theoden and Amir. We can both talk about Theoden.
Sure, that works. And don't forget, we also have Haldor and Howland, and Aldor and Howland too.
Yes, very true. I think Rohan is probably overtaken Gondor in terms of the number of profiles in it. I didn't realize how many until we started going over this. I knew they had a lot of heroes.
Rohan has.
Yeah, I didn't realize how many heroes they could take now. But go ahead, go for it.
So I'll go ahead and hit Durnhelm first, since Joe just got done with Eowyn and Mary. Meriadoc Brandybuck, Knight of the Mark. I really like that title for his character. But Durnhelm is basically just Eowyn and Mary combined, and you get that name from the Return of the King book, where Mary didn't even realize that Durnhelm was Eowyn until later on into their travels to Gondor. But that is literally the first thing that it says under Durnhelm's profile, is note that Durnhelm is in fact Eowyn, and that Mary is mounted on her horse alongside her. If your army includes Durnhelm, then it may naturally not also include Eowyn or Mary or any other variety, because you can't have, it's the rule of one, you can only have one named character. So even though it goes by the pseudonym of Durnhelm, you can't have Mary or Eowyn. So Durnhelm is a special profile that enables you to use Eowyn and Mary together as depicted in the movies and the books, and even allows you to use the rules for passengers for this pair in your match play games. It's pretty cool. Dernhelm, quote unquote, is Eowyn's shield maiden of Rohan armor and shield, with Meriadoc Brandybuck, Knight of the Mark, with shield mounted as a passenger upon her horse. Both will always start mounted and together. Whilst mounted, Dernhelm will follow all the rules provided on these pages rather than the ones presented in Eowyn's profile. However, should Dernhelm become dismounted, revert to the profile and war gear listed above for Eowyn and use them from this point forwards. Any wounds suffered or might, will, and fate points spent by Dernhelm will carry over to Eowyn's profile. So that's important because you basically get a model for 10 points cheaper than the two models. Because with them mounted and Dernhelm having armor and shield, she ends up being 10 points cheaper because you're basically getting you're getting the horse for free. It's actually 15 points cheaper because giving Mary the shield also makes him better. So you've got two Defense 5 models, and since they are passengers, you actually decide which one you're striking. Are you striking Mary? Are you striking, Dernhelm, quote unquote, Eowyn? They do have Expert Rider and Horselord, and then the other special rule is Mary. Mary follows rules for passengers as presented in the main rules manual, with the exception that whilst he remains Dernhelm's passenger, he may spend his might points to declare heroic actions and affect Dernhelm's roles in any of the usual ways. Additionally, whilst Mary is a passenger, Dernhelm also gains the benefit of his resistance to magic special rule. If Mary is slain or dismount, reduce Dernhelm's attack value to 2. So that's important because she actually has, or they have their own stat line. And it is basically the same stat line as Eowyn, only up to defense 5. So fight 5, 4+ shoot value, strength 3, defense 5 because she's got armor and shield, and then 3 attacks. So on the charge, you're getting 4, which is really powerful. And that's one of the things that some folks don't realize is you've actually got, 5 now, including Heir, since we talked about them. 5 heroes in this list with base 3 attacks. I'm sorry, 6, because we even forgot about Helm Hammerhand. But you have 6 models in the Rohan profiles that have base 3 attacks, so that's really good. War gear, armor, shield, sword, and horse, they covered that already when we were reading through the description. And then she's got her complement of 2 might, 2 will, 2 fate, and then Mary's 1 might, 1 will, 2 fate. And that's pretty cool because of the fact that Mary, I don't think, can use his fate points, according to this, to Horselord, but he can use his might. So he can use his 1 point of might to call her movement. And they do have strike, resolve, and strength, which is the same stats that Eowyn had. And then you can give him throwing spears. Nothing to laugh at. I think it's a really good model. I definitely take him, her, them together. They are still a minor hero. You can actually ignore that, though, with the next profile, which is Elfhelm. Elfhelm is the captain of Rohan, who's a hero of fortitude. And Elfhelm in the books was the captain of Rohan that kind of turned the other cheek when Eowyn tagged along. Just knew who she was and didn't really care because he knew that she was there for her uncle, King Theoden. So Elfhelm is fight 4, which is funny. Worse fight value than Eowyn. But hey, okay. Strength 4, defense 6, 2 attack 2, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. So again, another 3 might hero like Joe alluded to earlier. Having 3 might is kind of the go-to for these named heroes outside of a couple of them. So the other big thing that we haven't talked about is that these heroes are really cheap. Even if you put them on just a horse, the majority of them are less than 80 points. Some of them not even that many. I think there's a couple that are above that. Thade, Darwine, Aylmer. That's about it that are above 80 points. Erkenbrand. So they're really cheap. So you're not breaking the bank for these heroes. So you're going to get a lot of them. If you paid attention when Joe was talking about the list he built at 800 points earlier on, he had 22 22 warriors, because you said 10 riders and 12 royal guard. And I think he listed 6 or 7 heroes. So you're looking at a pretty low model count at 20, 28, 29 at 800 points. But having 6 or 7 heroes, you're talking about having 18 to 21 points of might. Because even Durnhelm technically has 3 points because of the fact that Eowyn's got 2 and Mary's got 1. So back to Elfhelm. He's got armor, sword, shield, and throwing spears. And I will say that Elfhelm, to me, with the new Forge World models, is the coolest model that has been released. So he has Expert Rider and Horselord, of course. And he has Heroic Accuracy and Heroic Defense. So that's pretty good because of the fact he's only defense 6, which is, I mean, he's kind of like what Joe was talking about earlier with these Royal Guard, these named Royal Guards, you know, the captains, Gambling, Hammer, and Darwine. Darwine's defense 7, but the other 2 are defense 6. So having heroic defense can help him stick around for a while. And his biggest thing is pinpoint accuracy. So he's got the throwing spears. We like to call this the cheeky throwing spear of death. So Elfhelm may reroll to hit, to wound, and in the way rolls when using a throwing spear. Additionally, Elfhelm never suffers the -1 penalty for moving and shooting when using a throwing spear. So he gets to move full out and can chuck a throwing spear. So that's really good. You're talking about 18-inch movement where he shoots on a 3-up. I don't think I mentioned that. So you can move him his full 10, still get his 8-inch range, and he's throwing on a 3-up. And oh hey, so I rolled a 2, which is something I do constantly. 1s or 2s to hit. Reroll it. All right. There's a guy in the way. Rolled a 3, so it's going to hit that. Nope. Reroll it. All right. Got a 4. It's getting through. All right. It's a strength 3 and a defense 5. Need a 5 to wound. Roll it. Got a 2. Nope. Reroll it again. Hey, I got a 4. Might want to spend a point of might for that. That's the situation where I've done it. Joe's actually done that a few times against me, and it really hurts. I will say I never get lucky enough with my Elfhelm. He usually either gets stuck in combats or moving second or something like that where I'm just not able to use the throwing spear that much. So I haven't had as much success with it, but I don't play Rohan as much as Joe does.
Yeah, so Elfhelm, I agree. Elfhelm's probably my favorite. So I'm kind of in a rut. Elfhelm's my favorite, probably Forge World Rohan model that's come out.
Yeah,
I like him more than I like him more than Darwine. I like Darwine model a lot, but Elfhelm has a certain characteristic about him. The model does.
The Darwine model to me looks goofy.
I like him better than Aldor and Haleth, just because I like him. I just like the model of him better. But in terms of my favorite Rohan model, I don't know, because I really like the new Amir, I really like the new plastic Theoden, I really like Durnhelm, and I really like Elfhelm. So if I had to pick one, I don't know. I like all of them. Give me all of them.
Well, Elfhelm's definitely my favorite Forge World one. He's
definitely my favorite Forge World one. He's definitely my favorite Forge World one.
But
then when I had to pick,
that's tough.
And to kind of chime in on Elfhelm, so we talked about the King's Huntsman earlier and how I thought he was kind of meh. In my opinion, Elfhelm takes the King's Huntsman mantle and runs with it. So when I first saw Elfhelm's profile, I was like, God, he's terrible. I was like, because I really was stoked for the Elfhelm profile because I knew it was coming. And I bought the model because I had to buy the model because it's a Rohan model. And I playtested him against
Rohan models.
I playtested him against Tom. And he was murdering orcs left and right with that throwing spear. And I was like, man, this is really good. And then, he was also murdering orcs in combat. So I was like, I'm going to give Elfhelm another try. So I started taking him in a couple other practice games. He is a serious piece.
Yeah. He's not one of those ones who's going to go... Unfortunately, he's not like Erkenbrand. Erkenbrand is a great troop killer, in my opinion, because he's fight 5. So with the fight 4 meta, Erkenbrand's going to go in there and really wreak havoc against troops. He basically going to do what Forlong does. Elfhelm is not as lucky because of the fact he's only fight 4. So if you're playing an army that has, or playing against an army that has a lot of fight 3, Elfhelm's going to go in there and wreck him. But if you're playing against a fight 4 stress or better army, you're going to have some issues, but he can still do a lot of damage.
I normally use him when I fought Myers Hammond, who was playing Iron Hills. I actually used Elfhelm. I was riding around. I killed a lot of guys with his throwing spear, despite them being defense 7 dwarves. I was like, oh, I'll spend that. I rolled a 5. I rolled a 3, and then I re-rolled into a 5. I was like, yeah, I'll spend a point of might. And I did that a couple times, but then I eventually used him to just go capture the objective. Because I was like, well, I don't really want to commit to a fight with him. So I just ran and got the objective. It was on Boggle War. He's really good for that kind of stuff because he's Courage 4, I think, Courage 4 or 5 with the will.
4, correct.
Yeah, he's not going to go anywhere.
I think he's definitely good. That's what I was saying earlier. He's definitely good, like Joe just mentioned. Running into a guy, I'm going to throw my spear. Okay, I failed. Re-roll the. Oh, hey, I got a 5. I need a 6. I'll let me spend my 1 point of might. So I can see him being really good for doing that and maybe spending his will to call heroic movements over, say, somebody like Darwine who has strike. So you don't want to spend a point of his might if you can save it for a strike against a better hero.
And also the fact that he has accuracy makes him really good for if you're shooting with your riders of Rohan.
Yeah, that's another one.
And you want to shoot in the way into back rank and try and take a hero's horse or wound a hero or take a banner out or whatever. It's a really good thing to have him and the King's Huntsman, and I think are the only 2 guys that have accuracy.
Correct.
I don't think Aldor has any heroic actions.
No. I think he might have accuracy. I think it's the only one he's got. Because he's got 1 point of might, and I think he's got accuracy. I actually don't have my War Rohan book on
me. But I think Elfhelm's. I fell in love with him. I was like, I thought the profile was garbage when I saw it, and then I kind of fell in love with him. So I shoehorn him in a lot of my lists, but he's normally the first model I cut out if I have to for points. So that being said, why don't we go over to his best friend, his bro, not literally his bro, his kind of his beer buddy, I guess, Thade. Yeah. Thade, Heir of Rohan. So Thade is one of those profiles that I actually used in the last edition. He wasn't the best, but he was pretty solid. He had 3 will, 3 might. He didn't have any fate. Yeah, no, he's very solid now. So he's a hero of valor, so he can lead 15 guys in the warband. Yep. He has fight 5, strength 4, defense 6, 3 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5. He's 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. So right off the bat in this edition, they took care of the one problem he had, which was his lack of fate. He has heroic strike, heroic challenge, and he has heavy armor and a shield, heavy armor and a sword. You can give him a shield to be defense 7. You can give him a horse and throwing spears. He has expert rider.
And he's one of those guys I talked about earlier. I alluded to there being 6 guys in Rohan that have base 3 attacks, and he's one of them.
So here's my thing with Thade. I took him in last edition just because I thought he was a decent pick and I wanted to try him, and he was good. He did good for me. In this edition, I saw this rule that he has, and I immediately threw him in my first Rohan tournament list. So he has Reckless Charge. Thade must charge an enemy model if he's able to do so. Additionally, on the turn of which he charges, Thade may reroll any failed to wound rolls during the fight. Now, why is this a big deal? Yes, he has to charge if he can. So it's a kind of detrimental if you're trying to sit back and shoot or do your typical Rohan stuff. But the way I see it, Thade's not going to be your leader, more than likely. Nope. And you can literally use him like a missile and go in there and slaughter stuff. So,
well, the key to that too is it's if he's able to do so. So if you are sitting back and cutting, like you said, you just got to make sure that you set yourself up where if your opponent moves the next turn and you want to get one more cheeky turn of kiting in, that you move him as far back as possible so he stays outside of the 10-inch charge range. Then you're good to go.
And I've learned too, if you actually place models in front of him so he can't get through the models to charge, then that's also kind of another way. But here's like my thing with him. So he's a Rohan model, so he gets the army bonus. So he's strength 5 on the charge. He's 3 attack base. He becomes 4 attack on the charge. I'm talking about charging infantry at this point. So he's going to knock that model down. Let's just say it's a shaman or something of that nature. Knocks the model down. Now you're talking about 8 strength 5 hits to wound. And he gets to reroll all failed wounds. I 1 turn killed a Dragon Knight with Daedric. I've one turn killed quite a few things. I've one turn killed a lot of things with Daedric, and the thing about the model's an older model. It's kind of my paint job on it's not the best. So there have been quite a few guys like, what's that model? Come on. And then he charges in, and there's a mushroom cloud where the model that they had once was. And Thade is a absolute monster. If he is actually one of the few models in the just pure Rohan list that I would consider not taking a Legendary Legion, just so I can pair him in with like Theoden or Amir or whoever, just because I think he's a powerhouse.
Yeah, him and Elfhelm combined, along with Amir, could really do a lot of damage because Amir's, your big hitting piece. We'll go over him next, most likely, when it comes to Might, Will, and Fate, as well as wounds. But Thade, you said it best. He charges into something, there's a dust cloud. I really can see him. Thade would be the one situation where I might consider actually taking gambling with the banner, just for the fact that I would want to give Thade a free, give him another point of might every turn, so I could have him doing as many heroic combats as possible.
Yeah, when I took my list to Philly the first time, the non-legendary, the non-Rohan Legendary Legion one, I actually literally had gambling riding behind Thade with the banner the whole time, because just perfect pick. I think
and that would work perfectly too, because then you're not only going to get that point of might to keep doing those heroics, you can charge them in together. Then you're throwing 7 dice.
Yep.
And he's going to have a banner on him and 6 base points of might if you really botched 7 dice. 8 with a reroll, which is something I would do.
He is an absolute powerhouse. I would recommend using him if you did not want to take a Legendary Legion, and he does have his own Legendary Legion, by the way. So we will talk about that when we talk about Legendary Legions. But he is one of my favorite Rohan profiles. Unfortunately, he's not part of the Riders of Theoden, which is my favorite way to play Rohan these days. So I can't take him, but he is an absolute beast. And I would recommend anyone wants to play Rohan or does, I would recommend trying him out.
I heard that.
He will do things that heroes like Aragorn could do, and he's a fraction of the points of Aragorn, or Boromir for that matter, or whoever. So the next profile is Amir. Amir is my favorite character for Rohan in the books, and in the movie I love Karl Urban as Amir.
Karl is an amazing actor. Can we just accept that for a moment?
Yeah, so I tend to...
I'm fanboying and I don't care.
I tend to shoehorn Amir in a lot of my lists. Amir has had quite a few,
He's got some pelts on his belt.
Yeah, he's done work for me in the past. I have a long history with him. Back in the day, I would use Knight of the Pelennor, and then I would take regular Amir to get the bow shot, and then I would take Knight of the Pelennor again because he has 3 might. But they've taken care of that problem for me because they actually combined his profile now. So
yeah,
he's
they used to have 2 profiles, Amir and then Amir, or Amir Marshall the Rinnemark and Amir.
Yep,
Knight of
the Pelennor. Yeah.
One of them was 2 attack, 2 wound. The other one was 3 attack, 3 wound.
And the beauty of the new Amir profile is he's actually comes out cheaper. If you fully kit him, he comes out cheaper than Knight of the Pelennor was.
Yeah, he does.
Not
by enough.
Yeah, but a little bit. Yeah. So Amir is fight 5, strength 4, defense 6, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. So he's 3s in all the right places. He has you can upgrade him with armor or armored horse, shield, throwing spears. He has heroic strike. He has heroic strength. He has Horselord. He has expert rider. The one reason why I really like Amir too in this list is he's probably one of your more tankier heroes you can take. He can take a lot of damage before he dies, because you do have a lot of heroes in your list that are 2 wounds, 1 fate.
Yes. Yeah, that is one of the bad things.
And he's one of those guys that you could send in against an Azog, or you could send in against an Aragorn, or you could send in against a troll or whatever, and know that if he loses the fight, he probably is not going to die that turn or whatever. So he's really tanky, and he also hits really hard with his 3 attacks, strength 5 on the charge with the Rohan bonus if he's mounted and all that good stuff. He does have one drawback. It's the price of grief. If Theoden or Eowyn are in the same force as Amir, and either of them or both are slain, for the remainder of the game, Amir adds +1 to wound rolls when fighting in the fight phase, and additionally, for the remainder of the game, Amir must charge if he's able to do so.
So he kind of becomes Daedric.
Yeah, and again, Amir is one of those pieces where when the fighting's in the thickest, he's normally in the thickest of the fighting, and I don't think it's too detrimental to him because
it could hurt. Like if you're trying to grab a scenario an objective last round of the game, and he's the only model in position, and you can't because of that. But it is very rare for it to happen, I would say.
And that's when we talk about Theoden, I'll talk a little bit about maybe safeguarding that, and Durnhelm, same thing. But normally when I play like with Durnhelm or Theoden, I try and put them in situations I know they can win, like for instance against warriors or heroes that don't know heroic strike.
With another hero too.
Yeah, exactly. So but Amir,
I want to backtrack real quick if that's okay. To Theoden.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is something I think you said it, but we totally missed it. Dude, he's got heroic challenge.
Yeah, he's Hero of Valor. Yeah,
he's a Hero of Valor, and when he charges, he re-rolls all failed wounds. That's crazy.
Yeah, we're talking about. So there are a lot of.
That's a mini Azog, dude.
Yeah, there are a lot of Heroes of Valor in the game that I would definitely feel very comfortable.
And pretty much any Rohan hero you can throw him against. That's I'm
thinking like fiefdom heroes, because every hero in the fiefdoms except for Imrahil is a Valor, and I for sure excuse me I know for a fact he can take Dunhir out. I know for a fact he can take Angbor out. I know for a fact he can take Forlong out. Yeah. They're probably like a ring wraith on let's just say you charge him in against a ring wraith, you're probably gonna kill that ring wraith.
Yeah.
Because the ring wraiths don't know strike.
I'd be willing to take him against Faramir.
Yeah, I definitely would. I think he could easily. Boromir would be iffy. I would kind of be. Yeah. I'd have a little pause about Boromir. But I mean, if he wins that fight, you're talking about maybe buffing your might up to like 5 might.
Yeah.
Pairing that up with the fact that he's such a beast. I mean, yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, think about even like going against Arnor. He could take on King Arbor Dewey.
Oh god, that's not even a fair fight.
I
know. So those are the Thade and Amir, though, are pretty much, in my opinion. So pretty much all the Rohan heroes are great in combat, like when they charge and stuff. But if you want heroes that can survive, that more Amir, less Thade, but guys that if you want to get into the thickest of the combat, they're really good picks. Amir can survive a lot better than Thade can. And I would recommend putting Amir in a list just because he can take those hits. He can tank shots. He can take objectives. He can go toe to toe with like Thranduil or someone and come out unscathed because he's defense 7 if you give him a shield. So he's a relatively sturdy guy to try and take down too. So.
Yeah, Amir is the tank for the Rohan list. He's got threes in every place. Might Will of Fate, attacks and wounds. Him and Helm Hand.
Yes, that's actually one reason why I like taking Amir in my list, because I like having one piece that isn't my leader that I know can fight. Like for instance, another thing about like for Fog of War, I like making Amir the guy I'm trying to protect because he has the most survival rate out of any of the other Rohan heroes in terms of his wounds and fate and etc.
Yeah, so. Even though you're going to be having him in the thick of the fighting, like Joe said, the fact that he's defense 7 with 3 wounds, you're willing to take the risk.
Most of your heroes will be once you lock into a fight with Rohan. An optimal turn for me is you charge all your heroes in, you call heroic combats all around, and you just try and go for a huge burnout in the first turn of combat. Make it to where the next turn your opponent's going to have a lot less pieces to be able to maneuver around you. So we'll go into the most important character in Rohan, and I think he should be. He's the king of Rohan, and is King Theoden. So King Theoden has had a long history with me. I used to take him in the old edition when he was no will, when he had 2 fate, 2 might. He was a relatively expensive piece. I would take him, and then he would get transfixed so nicely by a ring wraith, and he would sit there. I used to take Theoden a lot even before this current edition. So when this new Theoden profile came out, I was stoked for it because this is what I'm all about. I want to recreate the scene of the Pelennor. I want my army to be that, and you can't do that unless you have Theoden in your army. So Theoden is a hero of legend. I almost said he's the only hero of legend in Rohan. I believe Helm Hammerhand is also a hero of legend, but he is a hero of legend in Rohan. He is Horselord. He has extra rider. He's fight 5, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. So he has a really good profile for being able to sustain some damage. But he's your leader, so upgrade wise, I normally give him and Amir armored horses because it makes it a little harder for their horses to get shot out from under them, and pair that with Horselord, then you're talking about some real survivability of the horses. I definitely always
to use your 1 point of fate on your horse.
I always give Theoden heavy armor and a shield, so he becomes defense 7, which I'd recommend doing all the time with Theoden because he's going to be your leader, unless you are talking about pairing him up with fiefdoms or Gondor or something. So he has a really unique special rule. The will of men is easily corrupted. If Grima Wormtongue is within 6 inches of Theoden, King of Rohan Theoden is reduced to 3 attack and shot 4. Or sorry, not 3 attack. Fight value 3, shot 4, 1 attack. Additionally, he may not declare heroic actions and may not use will points. So they did him some justice because in the old edition he had no will to represent being corrupted by Grima. Now he's only corrupted when Grima's around, and
that's
great.
More accurate.
Theoden has a 12-inch steadfast rather than 6. So you talk about him being a hero of legend. Hero of legends automatically pass the first steadfast they're called to make. Yep. He has a 12-inch range on that. So you're talking about the first turn you get broken. You're probably not going to flee. I've had Theoden flee before. I've rolled deuces. Actually, it's happened quite a bit, especially before he got will. He would pretty much always flee from the battle. He'd be the first guy to run. But he has 3 will now, and of course, you're talking about magic and stuff. But I think normally he's pretty safe. He also has a special sword. Heir is a sword. Additionally, Theoden may use the feint strike, even if his fight value is lower than his opponent's. So that means he can feint against Gilgalad. Yeah, he can feint against Gilgalad and not take that strength 1 hit. So it's a nice little rule. I rarely do it, just because I normally don't want to put myself in a position where Theoden can lose the fight. Because I think your fight still is decreased by D3, I want to say.
Yeah, it still is. So you're still going to use the feint special strike. It's just that normally if you feint, say he's going up against, Boromir, who's fight 6, you would be stabbing there. So if you lose the fight, you take that straight 2 hit against you. That's one of the changes to feinting from the old rules, where before it was just like, well, why wouldn't I feint if I'm a lower fight value? There's no negative effect. So now it's stabbing. So basically, you would actually not stab; you would feint. So that's. I don't think I would ever use that, but.
Yeah, I forgot to mention too that Theoden does have heroic march, heroic strike, and heroic challenge. So he's a good pick because he can strike. There's probably no hero legend in the game except for Sharky that I would challenge with Theoden. And march is good. It just a lot of your heroes can have march, and the fact that he can have it is actually really handy. I've implemented it with him before, so.
Yeah, because Theoden's not really a hero you want in combat. You do and you don't. You do because if you take Darwine, then you want to be able to maximize Darwine's special rules, which you are paying for, which is free heroic combat. But that being said, if you are doing it, you're putting him against what? Maybe a single guy?
Yeah, I tend to see Theoden, so I let my other heroes, because I tend to take around 5 heroes in a Rohan list. I tend to have around 27 to 30 models in my lists. Theoden, normally I'm using him as a troop killer. He normally is going in there killing berserkers or Iron Guard or just warriors of Minas Tirith if that's all they got. He's safe in that spot killing troops. He has killed Helm Hammerhand before. When I versus Jerry Swanson, he killed Helm Hammerhand, which I didn't see happening.
That's crazy.
I didn't see happening. But that was one of those freak things where he rolled a 3 highest, I rolled a 6. Then I rolled 2 6s to wound. So it's just one of those freaky things that could happen. Don't always expect Hayden to do that, but he's always safe killing troops. I would pretty much make that. Yeah, for the most part. I'd pretty much make that his role. Yeah, as long as he charges. Because basically, guys, most of your army centers around Theoden. Your heroes getting... Oh, I won't talk about that. That's the Legendary Legion. Your warriors, though, getting their fight bonus, which is huge, focuses around Theoden's 12-inch bubble. And you guys...
12-inch stand fast. Free
12-inch stand fast.
Legend.
So you want him to stay alive. Yeah, you want him to stay alive. You don't want him to die.
That's Wine's ability.
Yeah, and also if he dies too, you're also risking then Amir going ballistic and Dernhelm. Yep. Or if Dernhelm ignores the rule, right? Unless she is separated.
No, Dernhelm is Eowyn, so I believe she uses that.
Oh, okay. I thought she ignored it for some reason, but basically you just want to keep Theoden safe, because if he does die, then you're talking about your army literally going into shambles, which makes sense because in the movie, in the book, when he died, Amir went ballistic and went on a suicide run into the Haradrim.
Actually, it wasn't until he saw Eowyn beside Thade that he went ballistic.
True. But yeah, I think my final thoughts on Rohan, because we've been talking about all the profiles. I think we'll cover Haldor and Aleth in our Legendary Legion one, because you're probably just going to use them for that. But we'll make that. I mean, honestly, we could make Rohan probably a 4-part video, but my final thoughts.
Legendary Legions for Rohan.
Yeah, my final thoughts for Rohan is this: it's a really good army, really versatile. When I go to a tournament or go to an event, I try and think of what scenarios could a said army win in. So, for instance, my hobbits, I know I could win a scenario like Domination or maybe Fog of War, but then I'm going to lose several scenarios like Reconnoiter. I'm probably going to lose Lords of Battle. So, Rohan's one of those rare armies where I think you could win pretty much every scenario with him, depending on what army you verse and depending on what tactic you use to play him. I think Rohan's optimal if you play them all mounted. I think that if you dabble in the Legendary Legions, that's its own beast. If you try and play foot Rohan, it's going to be a lot harder to do things like but I think Rohan's meant to be played all mounted, especially because of their army bonuses and their rules where riders can get 100% bow limit. I think they're meant to be mounted. I think you should do it. I think most players out there, I'd recommend playing Rohan. Don't expect to pick him up and be an expert with him automatically.
Yeah, that's what you said. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily it's after you start fighting, it's one of those things where it's the subsequent turns where you need to start setting yourself up for. So you're going to always be able to charge first, more than likely. You're going to probably run over your opponent that first turn of combat. There's always something freaky could happen where you roll bad or you get hurled or something. Wrath of Brunand was the big one for me. But then you gotta set yourself up to know what you can do next turn. And most of the time, it's going to come down to a 50-50 dice roll. So you got to kind of set yourself up. So I'm going to call him with this hero, or heroic move of this hero, heroic move of this hero. And that's one reason why I like to pack a lot of might into my Rohan armies, because it kind of requires a lot of might to be able to play the way I like to play them. That's just kind of how I do it, though.
Yeah. To go off of Joe's point, like I said a couple times now, I have Podium, and I am not a master. And quick anecdote about that is precisely as I went to Nashville a few times in 2019 and podiumed. I think I went there 3 times and podiumed 2 out of the 3. And I took Rohan, pure Rohan, to 2 of them, and 2 of them, and then an Alliance to the 3rd. Well, I podiumed in the first 2 and did not do so well in the 3rd one. And the second one and the 3rd one is when I played it pure. And I came in, and it was a 2-day event. It was round 3, so I was exhausted because I drove up the morning of, which is a 6-hour drive from where I live in North Carolina to Nashville, and got there right about 30 minutes before the first round started at noon. So we were starting the third round, and I'm not even going to lie, I was dead exhausted, so I wasn't even thinking. So when you're talking about not setting yourself up in a good position, I had 14 Riders of Rohan hurled. I had one Rider Rohan hurled by the Witch King through 14 Riders of Rohan, and every single one of them died. So that broke me, and mentally broke me too. I was really just like, well, that's game. So like Joe says, you got to be very meticulous with how you set yourself up. That first turn, I would agree that you charge. You've got to get your heroes in. You've got to get get them into a position where they can not only do heroic combats, but do heroic combats successfully to maximize damage. So in your first turn, you're not charging in every single hero. Theoretically, you would be charging. Your opponent would not be able to countercharge you. So I would put every single one of my heroes against one guy. Make sure you kill that one guy. So 5 or 6 heroes killing one guy. That's 5 or 6 guys, and then charge off of that. Pair them up with a Royal Guard, pair them up with a Rider or Rohan. So then you're going to move all of them and get up to maybe 10 to 12 extra charges after that. So you could deal potentially 12 to 14 kills in one turn. And Rohan is a low model count army. Joe said it. He gets 28 to 30 models. And 30 is on the high end if you're playing like 800 points. So if you can do that, you're probably going to be eliminating your opponent's numbers advantage or drawing really close. And then after that, you're just fighting one-on-ones. And with all the bonuses you have, the charge bonus, the strength bonus, the fight value bonus from Theoden, if you have him, it's really going to overwhelm your opponent. So mastering it takes time. Like I said, I podiumed in 2 events with him. And then in the 3rd event, I got hurled through 14 of my own guys and watched every single one of them die. So it's not like, oh, yeah, I'm doing really great. I'm a master. No. You can still end up screwing up and getting really hurt badly. But one other thing I wanted to say is that they have 3 green alliances, which I think is one of the most in the game. I think there's they have 4. I'm sorry. They have 4 armies that they are green alliances with. And that is the Fiefdoms. That is the Fellowship. It's the Fellowship?
I know they're green with Lothlorien.
Lothlorien, that's it.
Yeah, it's Lothlorien. Dunharrow.
No, not Dunharrow.
No? I thought they were.
No, it's the Fiefdoms, Lothlorien, Minas Tirith, and the Wildmen of Druidan.
Okay.
So I know that's kind of.
No, they were not. For some reason, I thought they were.
They're yellow with the
Dunharrow. I mean, it makes sense. Rohan was scared of the Dwemerberg and all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about 4 green alliances, and you can really cover some weaknesses or make some really cool alliances. I used to play a Gondor Fiefdoms Rohan combo before they came out with the new FAQ that required you to have, a Hero of Valor now for alliances? The Hero of Valor?
If it's a green alliance, I think it's Fortitude.
Is it Fortitude? Okay.
I believe so.
Well, it's still killed because what I would do was I was taking Boromir with Boromir and Imrahil, so I got 2 big Fight 6 striking heroes right there, and then maybe 2 Swan Knights for a couple heavy cav, and then just having men at arms backing up warriors in Minas Tirith, so I'd have fight 5 when they're near Imrahil, and then some archers from, I believe, I want to say I took archers from Fiefdoms. So who are those? Those are the Blackroot Vale archers. But then I would ally in Durnhelm, who's a minor hero, with 6 riders. And that would be my little strike unit. Yeah, I would change it up. I'd either take 2 or 3 Royal Guard and then 3 or 4 riders, or I'd take all riders or something like that, or all Royal Guard with throwing spears, just kind of like a shock unit with Durnhelm. Someone who's got fight 5 with heroic strike with 6 guys that can run around and just become like a little mini ballistic missile. And it worked really well. That's one of the events, the first Nashville event I took it to, and like I said, I podiumed, and then I actually got 4th place at RGS Ringo South in 2019 with that list as well, and I only needed 1 tournament point to get up to 3rd. Unfortunately, my final game was a 0-0 draw, because it was Storm the Camp, and I couldn't get my Rohan guys over there because they got shot out because my opponent saw that was my movement. But they've got a lot of guys you can ally with and make some really cool combos. So Rohan is definitely one of my favorite armies. They're actually the reason I got into MESBG back when it was just Lord of the Rings strategy battle game. After watching the 2 towers and seeing 2 towers, Helm's Deep scene was and probably still is one of my favorite scenes from Lord of the Rings trilogy, and they got me into playing Rohan just when those riders come down the hill with Amir and Gandalf. And, I mean, they still had the bonuses back then with the extra attack when you charged. And that was one of the things that got me into the game way back when. It was like 2004, 2005.
I got into SVG too because of Rohan.
Yeah,
I play them.
Rohan's awesome.
Yeah, I played them in every edition of SVG, and then I played them in War of the Rings as well.
Nice.
But yeah, guys, we're going to cut this video. We might make a follow-up because we still have 3 profiles to cover, but we might just cover them in the Legendary Legion section as well. So
yeah, I think we will. We'll definitely cover the Legendary Legion section.
So please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you guys in the next video. Take care,
y'all.